The United States is the world's most enduring example of democracy. In this moment, the nation confronts historic challenges and opportunities for governance and engagement. Stories in Democracy, in partnership with Snow Libraries and the Daily Herald, explores the issues facing our communities and the future of democracy through a series of personal conversations with the congressional representatives of Snohomish and Island counties.
Welcome to Stories in Democracy, a partnership between Snow Isle Libraries and the Daily Herald. I'm Lois Langer-Thompson, the Executive Director of Snow Isle Libraries. Joining me is John Bauer, the editorial page editor of the Daily Herald newspaper. Together, we will discuss the future of the American democracy and representative government and explore opportunities for governance and engagement as the nation confronts historic challenges. Our guest today is Congressman Rick Larsen, who represents Washington State's 2nd Congressional District, which includes portions of Snohomish, Skagit, and Whatcom counties, and all of Island and San Juan counties. He serves on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman Larsen is the chair of the Aviation Subcommittee and the co-founder of the Congressional Arctic Working Group. Congressman Larsen is a proud and frequent user of the Library of Congress, as well as his local library, and his family has lived in the district for 5 generations. Congressman Larsen's district includes 15 of Snow Isle Library's 23 community libraries, as well as the Everett Public Library. Welcome, Congressman Larsen. And I'm going to throw it over to John Bauer to get our conversation started.
Where I want to start is really with your start, where you got your start in public service and in your political life. And I'd like to hear that story.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think every member of Congress has an apocryphal story, a story that has an element of truth to the myth. But these are actually true stories for me. My interest in government goes back quite a long time. It was true, and when I was 7, what I want for Christmas essay in 2nd grade was a scale model of the White House and a plaque with all the president's pictures on it. So there was an interest, I think, in my part. My mom tells me I used to read the newspaper as a child. I still do read the newspaper, keep up on things, what's going on in the world. And then it really did come out of an interest, and then that interest turned into something more of a passion. I had good role models with my mom. Jokingly say was the unofficial 6th board member of a 5-member school board. Since I was one of 8 kids, she was actively involved in the schools and actively involved in our lives, and pushed us to be involved in the life of our public schools and in our community as well. I think in part because I'm one of 8 kids, it was a way to manage our time, get us out of the house, maybe, but it was still, the end result was active involvement in our community. And then my dad was on the city council in Arlington and on the airport commission for a while as well, on the planning commission. The point is there was this ethic in the household about being involved, about being part of the community that makes decisions for the broader community. And so I said that interest sort of then became an ethic and a passion for me. And as a result, I pursued this career in public service.
Thanks. I think you've touched on it a little bit, but I'm curious, that passion and legacy that your family brought you, is that part of what keeps you in this work? And what else keeps you passionate and engaged in this work?
What keeps me engaged is the constant gratitude of a grateful nation. No, you don't get a lot of thanks in this job, that's for sure. It's really the desire to show people that their government, and it is their government, does work. It works in fits and starts. Sometimes you try to make it work and it doesn't. But government is not an other. It's not something else. It is theirs. It belongs to people, and we in public service have an obligation and responsibility to try to make it work. sometimes, the answer is that you have to tell people is no, we can't do that. But people need to have the ability to interact with people in government in order to try to help solve their problems. And in the end, for all the divisiveness that's going on right now in the U.S., it really is about continuing to try to show people, that it's their government and it can work. But it's never, and there's no end to that. It's a constant process, and that can be that's a frustrating part for some people to sort of gather, to sort of understand.
Yeah. I wonder if I could. Go ahead, John.
Oh, I was just going to say, just to continue on that line. This is what's the old curse? May you live in interesting times.
Right. Yeah.
You've got fencing going up, or has gone up now, in advance of another protest. Does that change how you change your daily life beyond just more checks? How does that affect how you do your job? As
noted, I'm in Everett, Washington today, so I'm not in Washington D.C. And there is a demonstration this weekend. I'm not sure how large it's going to be, but I think it's wise that the Capitol complex around the U.S. Capitol is secured, so that we don't see even a minor repeat of January 6th. But the insurrection on January 6th, I think, is a seminal moment right now in the life of Congress. At least for me, I know I can name all 136 members of Congress who voted against doing a basic function of the Constitution and certifying the election. And it makes it, I call it the insurrection hangover, the January 6th hangover, that's always in the back of my mind about who these folks are. But on the other hand, nothing is about me. It's about serving people in the district. And so regardless of who the folks are who, in my view, didn't do their job, didn't do their constitutional duty, didn't support our democratic republic, they're still in Congress, and I still have to work with them. And so it's sort of, there's this tension that wasn't there before for me, a tension between, knowing these folks didn't support our democratic republic, and also knowing that they're not going anywhere, I'm not going anywhere. And if I need their help to serve the people I represent, then I will ask for their help, because I would be committing political malpractice if I didn't do what I could legally and ethically do to support the people I represent. So it has introduced a new tension in what it means to serve from my perspective.
I appreciate the conversation about really the democratic ideal. We come together with varying viewpoints and decide what's best for the country. And I wonder, as you think about this tension you're living in and working in, how do you see that? I know you're also a student of history. So how do you see this in the context of history and what we might learn from that going forward, and how to build a better future together?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been asked that question in many different ways. The most common way is, how do you do it? How do you serve there? And you do have to put things in perspective. And it's difficult and can sound trite, especially. I read a lot of history, but I'm not a historian. But it can kind of sound somewhat trite coming from me as a member of Congress. It can sound like I'm defending what's going on. But this isn't leading to an actual civil war. Which we had in 1861 through 65, and a lot of things led up to that. We are seeing people demonstrate for the right reasons. But I think about the civil rights movements of the 50s and the 60s, and I don't think we're headed to that kind of tumult. But I do think that we need to continue to stand up for our democratic ideals. I think we need to continue to support voting rights and access the ballot box. I think more than anything, what's going on right now is a reminder that we're never done with our democracy, and we always need to defend it, and consciously defend it. I think some folks take it for granted that the sun comes up. The metaphorical sun comes up every day on our democracy. I hope that it does, but I'd like to think that if I keep working to support our democratic republic, then I'm doing my part to ensure that the sun comes up on our democracy every day. It's not something you get to sit around and wait for. One of my mentors in politics, that some folks know, a guy named Bob Drewell, always say that democracy is not a spectator sport. It's not something you watch on TV. It's something you have to participate in order to keep it strong.
My question fits into that. We all encourage folks to vote, but what would you hope to see your constituents do beyond voting? What should we be doing?
Right. On voting, first off, what I do tell people is the best way to protect your right to vote is to vote. And first and foremost is to actually cast that vote. And that's if that happens, and it doesn't matter how many barriers are put in front of you, figuring out how to cast that vote, which in Washington is very easy. In other states, people are making it less easy, in fact, much harder. But finding a way to be sure that you do cast your vote is the number one thing we can do to support the right of people to vote. So that's first. The second is kind of what I tell high school students or middle school students when they ask, what can they do? And that's, to understand what you like to do. What do you love to do in your community? And then find a way to volunteer to do that. It doesn't have to be in government. You don't have to work in government to be part of the civic life, to be part of the broader community that you work in. You can be active with the Friends of the Library, as for instance, as an example. I found that during COVID, my COVID activity was bird watching. And so I've done some things to highlight some of the wildlife and some of the wildlife restoration projects, which are part of work as well, but they're also interesting and fun. I get to meet different and new people, and it does my heart good. And so if people have the opportunity and the time, it doesn't have to be something big to show involvement and get the personal, your own personal benefit from involvement. It could be something very just that fits into your time. So I tell high school students and middle school students all the time: find out what you love, get involved. If you're in long enough, people will notice that and they'll ask you to do the next thing and the next thing, and maybe one day that can turn into running for office if you'd like. So that's where I would start, John, with people, that ask them to just find the one thing, not everything, just the one thing, even the smallest thing, to be involved in.
Great.
Yeah, it does really. Sometimes those small acts have big impact over a long period of time. I wonder if you can talk about where you get your information from when there's so many, and this is another question that I'm sure you've been asked before, but when we aren't agreeing on what truth is and what facts are, I wonder where you get your information and what you might encourage others to use.
Yeah. So let me tell you how I use the internet. I'm working through right now a show on Netflix. It's 7 seasons long. And I won't get into which one it is, but what the great thing about the internet is if I feel anxious about something happening in a show, I can go on the internet and read about what happened in that episode. So I know what's going to happen, so I can feel less anxious. That's a good use of finding information on the internet. If you're looking for things about public policy and so on, probably not the best use. The internet's probably not a great use. So there's way too much other information on there. So I have the opportunity, and others do too. But I use for the job. I use tried and true sources like Congressional Research Service. I look at some of the think tanks that are based in Washington, D.C. There's a few here in Washington State that put out information on issues as well. And they're not, and I say they're fairly objective, or they reflect the writing of the person who's writing them, not of the group that the person is, working for. And I think that what people do run into online is groups that really aren't. They're pushing an interest, and everything coming from that group is pushing a point of view. I just don't think that's helpful or useful, at least in my job, because the 750,000 people I represent don't have a view. I have an obligation to, if I disagree with something, at least to understand where that person's coming from. Understanding does not mean acceptance. And I think we've certainly gotten away from that principle. People say, well, if you understand what I'm saying, then you must agree with me. It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. That surprisingly really makes people angry. That if I understand them but don't agree with them, they really get angry with me. And that is very unusual as well. But 20 years ago when I started, there was a lot less of that. And so I think that folks need to work on finding sources that challenge them. I'm not asking folks to say, go 50-50. Find one thing out of the 100 things you're reading that disagrees with you, just to expose yourself. So, I'm sorry, it's a long answer. I do get information from sources online for certain, but I have to consciously be really aware of the source of that source as well. In my job, I have access to things like the Congressional Research Service, which is objective analysis of issues. When I do read books on things, I'm usually reading them related to my work. And if I'm reading a book that's not related to my work, it's really not related to my work, because it takes a lot of time to get through a book. So even shorter ones. So I try to be really discerning about the literature, the books that I read as well. So not a very good answer. It's just, you absorb a lot of things in this job as well, frankly.
And no, I appreciate it. And I think that call to read things that you disagree with that might have a different viewpoint. I have always found that really helpful. It sometimes changes my mind. Sometimes it solidifies what I've already thought, but it challenges you to question what you believe and to think about other sides. So I really appreciate that aspect.
Yeah.
Congressman, I want to ask if it's frustrating at all for you to see legislation progress through the House, particularly that which you support, and then to see things get bogged down when they move to the Senate. And do you just kind of have to take a hands-off approach at that point, or
not necessarily a hands-off approach, but I'm not. It's frustrating, but I'm not in the Senate, so I don't really have I don't have the vote over there. There are 100 people who do have the vote over all the way over there in the Senate. It's about 100 yards from the House of Representatives, and some days it's 100 years from the House. So I think that that the way I approach it, though, is that question, and again, that's a question I get a lot in a lot of different forums, is to say that the odds of something passed in the Senate are zero if the House doesn't act to pass something over to the Senate. The odds increase to a range of 0% to 100% if the House does pass something. So the thing is, it might be frustrating to pass things out of the House and send to the Senate where they get bogged down. But if you don't pass it out of the House, it doesn't even have the opportunity to be bogged down. And you're always unlikely to get 100% of what you want anyway in a bill that passes the House. And you're definitely unlikely to get a bill that passes the House and goes to the Senate and get 100% of what was in the House bill. But you have to do that to put it in play, because near the end of the year, end of the calendar year, the House and the Senate really get heavy into negotiating all the issues that we've been dealing with over the last year. And if frankly, in the process, if you don't have something that's been passed out of the House, that really undermines your leverage in negotiating with the Senate. So, I think the way I look at it, this is the process. And in some way, shape, or form, it's been the process for 234 years. And so it's not all that new. It's just more people are attuned to the ugliness of it because of access to social media and access to internet, proliferation of cable. It's everyone talking about. People say, "Well, what can I do? What can I do to stop being so tense about this?" Or stop watching, read a book, disengage. It's not a car wreck that you have to watch. It's you can choose not to for a while. That will certainly. I don't know that option, but that's my job. That's what you like your member of Congress in some respects to get in the middle of this and be part of these negotiations to make things happen. So you don't have to, but stay engaged every once in a while and check in with it. But I don't get all that frustrated about it because it's a long game on issues. It took me 6 years to pass the first piece of wilderness, the Wild Sky Wilderness out in Index. It took 6 years to pass that bill, not a day, and not even 1 year, 6 years, but it got passed. And you got to stick with this stuff.
Thanks for the permission for everyone to disengage as appropriate and needed. But I wonder when people do want to engage with you, I know you're out in the district a lot and people meet with you at town halls and events, but I wonder what's your preference for how citizens can engage with you and inform you on what they're thinking and wanting you to work on?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We're still getting quite a bit of correspondence from the district. Mainly through email, and there's some engagement online, but email is still the best way to go. And we still get a lot of paper letters, postcards and that. So, and on average, over the last 5 years, we're averaging about 60,000 communications a year coming to the office. And some of that is in form letters and form emails, but a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are personal letters too. So we try to get back to folks as best we can, given the limited resources we have that I have in the office. But that's still the best way to engage. I haven't done any live town halls in a while. I'm looking forward to doing that at some point in the future, and give people an opportunity to come and ask questions. And those can be, town halls can be as much of a grab bag as the letters that we get. I usually try to give an update on what's going on, what I'm working on, what Congress is doing, and and the first question will be about something that's totally unrelated. I am looking forward to getting back in the community. Then as well, we try to tie my visits throughout the district to legislation, things I've been working on. And so we try to marry up the work in Congress, actually in DC, with the outreach that we do in the district on the issues that I've been focused on. And so we get to see people. I get to see people, and they get to see me in those environments. They're a little more controlled, only because you can't invite the public to a local aerospace company. That's not going to happen. But there's women and men who live in the district who work at these smaller businesses that I'm interested in knowing what we can do to help them, what I'm doing to get in their way, and I want to stop doing that if that's possible too. So, so a lot of ways to interact. Right now, the biggest way is through the online and letter communications.
Great. Well, we just have one last question for you, which I wouldn't be a librarian if I didn't ask you. What book or podcast are you recommending right now? Or it could be a Netflix show.
Yeah, right. It won't be a Netflix show. No one needs to know. Only Netflix needs to know my watching. And they can send me more things that I'm not interested in watching. So yeah, on podcasts, interesting. I tend to, if I've listened to podcasts, I tend to listen to podcasts related to work. So I'm on the Armed Services Committee. There's a podcast called War on the Rocks. That's a pretty good show where they interview folks in the national security space about issues of the day, national security issues, international security issues. And so that's interesting. And I can do that while I'm cooking or eating dinner or something, whatever it is. I can just put it on. On my reading list right now is I just finished one of Malcolm Gladwell's book called Talking with Strangers, which I'd highly recommend if you want to learn why people don't communicate well. He goes into this into discussion. But on my pile right now is several books, including the third book in a series by an author named Amy Stewart, and it's about the Kopp sisters. It's based on a real life KOPP, Kopp sisters, who one of them was the first female police officer in New York State back in the 20s or something. Mm-hmm. And it's a fictionalized version of their life, but they're mysteries. And I'd like to read a lot of mysteries, so that's on my list. So if you're interested, I think the first book is Girl with Gun. I think that's the first one, if I'm not mistaken. And this one is called like Cop. It's sitting on my calendar. It's like Kopp Sisters Midnight Confessions, I think is what it's called, if I'm not mistaken. So it's the third in the series. So again, I try to find things that aren't related to work. The other book on my shelf that it's waiting is this will be the longest answer you ever get on this series, on this thing is
I'm taking down notes.
Yeah. Well, I found two books. They're both nonfiction. One is about some project that Henry Ford and Thomas Edison put together, like in the 1920s, and called Electric City. A book called Electric City. And the third book I picked up yesterday is about these two Jewish families in Shanghai, China, in the 20s. That it's one of the little known stories about China in the 20s and the 30s, and then with the Japanese invasion in the 30s. There's quite a large Jewish population in Shanghai in the 20s and 30s, and how these families not just built up their businesses, but then during the invasion became a conduit of escape for many people as well, and even into the war, so into World War II. So a lot of interesting stuff to read out there for folks. It takes you away a little bit, it teaches you a little bit about history, and also, pick up a mystery. You'll be going through that thing, trying to get to the end as quickly as possible. Find out who done it.
Right, it's great,
And it's never the butler.
No.
I will tell people, if you read mysteries, and if you want to read mysteries, folks, there's three motives, right? There's love, revenge, and money. There are always three motives in a mystery. There's one of three. And if you understand that rubric, it helps you with the whodunit. So
I love it. And a great variety on your nightstand and reading and listening. So appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you. I think, we called this Stories in Democracy, and I think you have shown why we called it that our personal stories matter, but also the stories of others. And I really appreciated the call to engagement, wherever that may be, and that our story that we bring out into our community makes a difference. So I know John and I, we have books to read and lots to think about from having this time with you. We really appreciate it, and want to thank you for your time here and also your leadership in the House. So thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.